Alrighty, hello and welcome to this boss guide for the infamous Lagon. If you've done the story content, then you are already familiar with Lagon. This is a similar fight, just quite a bit more challenging. Now you'll encounter Lagon in the Ending the Storm timeline, and Lagon's damage types are cold, lightning, and physical. Now as far as modifiers to avoid, you should look out for Enrage at half health, Frenzy and Haste when hit, and Armor and Protections as a percentage of health. The Lagon fight is a 3-phase fight, with 2 Lagon phases and an add phase in the middle. Let's start with phase 1. There are 4 mechanics that you need to deal with in phase 1. First, and by far the most dangerous, is the laser beam. This is a very high dot damage attack, and it's most likely both cold and lightning. So you want your prots up high, but honestly, almost every build's going to get hit extremely hard and die very quickly from this, so your best bet is to just avoid it altogether. Now for this particular attack, Lagon winds up and then shoots a beam from his eye that strafes about half of the platform, so it's a very large area attack overall. Now Lagon begins this attack by targeting the player or a minion, and he seems to have 2 animations. One is a short one, and one actually follows the player. The second animation can trap players that are standing too close to the side of the platform. The strategy for avoiding this beam is always stand near the middle of the platform, and when you see his eye glow red, start moving to one side of the platform. The second attack we'll talk about is what I'm calling Moonburst. It's a short burst of moderate high damage that occurs in a circle. It's unclear what the damage type is, but it's probably the same as a laser beam, so expect cold and lightning. When this attack occurs, Lagon's eye glows red, and he moves upward while a circle with a vision of the moon is created on the ground. He then fires a short burst that encompasses the circle. This attack is easy to avoid, just move out of the circle when you see it. The third attack is a beam burst. It's a short linear burst of moderate high damage that shoots out from Lagon's eye, similar to the laser beam. Lagon's eye turns red as he bows his head downward, and then after a short period, quickly lifts his head and fires the beam where the player was standing before he dropped his head. This attack is also easy to avoid, just move sideways as he drops his head. The next one is actually 2 separate attacks, but they're very similar. They're both claw attacks, and they're both physical damage. One is a slam type with very high stun chance and a long stun if it is successful. Another is a pincer attack. Slam is always from his left claw, while pincer is always from the right. The pincer attack does low to moderate damage, while slam does moderate to high. You can avoid these attacks by strafing sideways when Lagon starts to raise his claw. But also make sure you have decent physical protections, as these are much harder to avoid than his other attacks, and you will likely get hit by them a few times. There are also low damage lightning attacks that occur throughout the phase. These can largely be ignored as they don't do much damage. Alright, let's move on to phase 2. So at 50% health, Lagon starts to channel light fissures on the ground, which signify the phase change. Lagon will then teleport the player back down off of the platform and into the arena area. This phase has 3 different adds: Lagon's tentacles, Adrift Marunas, and Flare Sharks. Lagon's tentacles are the primary target for the player, as killing enough of them will end the phase. The moon in the center of the arena will track your progress. When the moon is full, the phase is over. As far as the tentacles themselves, they do low damage, but they have high stun chance. Adrift Marunas are the very definition of trash mobs, with low damage, but they also appear in packs. And Flare Sharks are slightly more dangerous than Marunas, but ultimately still a trash mob with relatively low threat to the player. Both Marunas and Flare Sharks can be killed at the player's leisure, as long as they don't accumulate in groups that become too large for the player to handle. The add phase also has 2 other mechanics. The lightning strikes from phase 1 persist into phase 2, and also tidal waves will begin to move across the screen in a semi-random pattern. They do moderate damage and can be avoided, but given how numerous they are, the player is likely to get hit by at least a few of these, so cold protection is beneficial to keep the damage from overwhelming the player. Once enough of Lagon's tentacles have been killed, Lagon will teleport the player back to his platform, and this will signify the start of phase 3. Note that currently Lagon never stops doing his own mechanics during phase 2, even though the player cannot see them during that phase. This means that the transition to phase 3 can cause the player to spawn near or even in the laser beam if that is the mechanic that Lagon is currently using. Hopefully this will be fixed soon, since dying to the beam from no fault of your own isn't a very enjoyable experience. Now for Phase 3 itself, it's identical to Phase 1, but with one exception. The tidal waves from Phase 2 have been added to this phase and will go across the entire platform starting from either side. Avoid these when possible, but maintain focus on Lagon's own mechanics as they are much more deadly. And that covers the entirety of the Lagon boss fight. There are several mechanics you have to worry about more so than others, particularly that laser beam attack. If you can avoid that, you will probably make it through this fight. Just focus on the Eye of Lagon as your primary concern, and you should do pretty well in this fight. All right, thank you so much for watching. If you would like to see more content on Last Epoch, I stream 5 to 6 days a week. Would love to have you there. Almost always streaming Last Epoch. And a lot of the time is in Monolith of Fate or in the arena or working on builds. So feel free to come hang out, chat, ask questions. Also, I have a Discord where we often talk about Last Epoch, but also other ARPGs and even other video games. Feel free to join us there as well. Thank you so much for watching and have a great time in Last Epoch.